everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Christina Pan. Welcome to my LinkedIn Live podcast. I'm an executive coach and I specialize in helping CEOs, founders, and senior executives get strategic clarity and confidence in your journey pioneering where there are no precedents. We strategically leverage your zone of genius for your next 10x. This is the last of my podcast series on Wednesdays, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. You can find all my podcast episodes on YouTube. The last 3 episodes in this series were about first principles, reframing naysayers, and impossible goals. And all these were in context of applying it to you personally for your highest leverage. Each podcast is about 15 to 20 minutes, and I will open a Q&A for 5 minutes at the end if I see any questions in the comments. So don't be shy. Feel free to post questions or even just comments in the comments. So 2 outcomes for this podcast series. 1, I want to spark your mind with non-obvious insights or on relatable obstacles that block leaders who are leading the next stage of AI innovation and growth, pioneering where there are no precedents. And 2, if you want to close these gaps for you, I invite you to explore partnering with me in an executive coaching journey to be higher leverage with your zone of genius and create outsized impact in ways that only you can create. So today, I want to spark your mind on a surprising blind spot on negative framing and how it could be a shadow of strategic and analytical strengths, and why it could be blocking your best inventive thinking and decision making. So Elon Musk made this joke at Davos, and it speaks to this blind spot that I commonly see. Elon said, "For quality of life, it is actually better to err on the side of being an optimist and wrong, rather than a pessimist and right." Yes, so let me say that again. It is better to err on the side of being an optimist and wrong, rather than a pessimist and right. I didn't expect this of Elon, and I like how he ended with some humor. He said this at the end of his fireside chat with Blackstone CEO Larry Fink at Davos recently. And I think, in my personal point of view, why everyone laughed at this is because we can all relate to how human it is to fall into negativity bias. Which leads me to the first non-obvious insight I want to share with you today, which is a surprising blind spot is how often we default to a negative framing and how negative you can be about yourself and others. One of my CEO clients said this was one of the most surprising blind spots from our executive coaching journey together thus far. He said, "The amount of things you asked me to reframe in this process is amazing to me. You know, how tough I've been on myself and others." This was coming from my clients. And he also had a lot of self-compassion, which I love. He said, "It's just human." And so, one, I want to say recognizing this blind spot is a breakthrough in itself. Like, to be able to recognize this pattern in yourself from externalizing and strategizing together. You know, I'm your sounding board, reflecting back to you various thought patterns. And he also has strategic in his zone of genius. So pattern recognition is one of his top natural gifts. Now, many of my clients actually have strategic in their zone of genius. I also have strategic in my zone of genius. So when we're a sounding board together, our combined strategic is like on the level of like, "Ain't no stopping us now," you know, like that 1970s song. And also, it's not just us or my clients who might have this gap holding back your highest impacts. Jensen Huang also relatably deals with this on a daily basis too. He talked about this on Joe Rogan's podcast recently. Jensen said, "I have a greater drive from not wanting to fail than the drive of wanting to succeed." He said, "The world has just heard me say that out loud for the first time, but it's true. Fear of failure drives me more than the greed or whatever it is, you know, the success side." And so this leads me to my second non-obvious insight. This blind spot of negative framing can be a shadow of strategic and problem-solving strengths, which applies to a lot of people inventing and innovating on the AI frontier. I mean, that's why you are pioneering and inventing things. It's because of those strategic strengths. And so one of my clients talked about it in this way. He said, I have historically seen a lot of problems, not opportunities, or gaps in capability, gaps in progress, or gaps in profitability. The McKinsey way is to find problems and then show you how you can get past them. It's not just McKinsey. This is just engineering any inventive solution, is to figure out what the problem is and find a solution. And so the flip side is your strength can become a shadow when you over-index in this strength. A shadow as in it holds back your highest impact, your highest leverage, your greatest potential, your best mental energy, and your best decisions. That's what I mean when I say it's a shadow of your strength. And so being a genius at problem solving can lend to focusing on looking for problems. And when you're looking for problems, you can get overly focused on what's wrong rather than what's right. It's like when a parent says, why didn't you get 100%? Why only 99%? Instead of, wow, way to celebrate. How did you get 99%? Does this resonate with anyone? I think many of us can relate. My parents were not like this, but the Asian culture that I come from definitely has a lot of this. And so the good news is this is fully within your control. This is what my clients and I do when we partner together in executive coaching, is that we reframe this pattern using your zone of genius as a framework to get transformational unlocks for you, so that these blind spots and obstacles like negative framing aren't clouding your best thinking when you are leading many decisions that involve high stakes and high consequence, especially in the area of AI. And so a third non-obvious insight that I want to share today is using your zone of genius as first principles on you is how we get to strategic clarity and conviction. And that inherently involves a positive framing. My philosophy and approach as an executive coach is fundamentally attuned to flipping negative framing, because if we focus on what you're really, really good at, that is automatically focused on what's right about you, not what's wrong. And one of my clients put it this way. He said, we don't spend very much time talking about what are my bag tools. There's not a lot of value in dwelling in the past. But instead, if you lean into the things you are great at, they tend to crowd out the things that you're not as good at. Yes, that is right. My philosophy is forget your weaknesses. That's low leverage. We don't got time for that. And as my client said, when we focus on your zone of genius, it naturally crowds out worrying about weaknesses. We do want to be aware of them, of course, and that's where strategizing about finding teammates and partners who complement your zone of genius comes into play. But, I find that most people are not maximizing their zone of genius. There are major parts of their zone of genius that are underutilized. And so there is so much more opportunity to be tapped into in terms of maximizing your zone of genius instead of worrying about what's wrong. And so why does this all matter? It matters because I want to ask you, and you could ask this of yourself at every decision, are you deciding from faith or fear? Because fear restricts rather than expands who you are. I love this quote. I got it from a Jay Shetty meditation, and he was quoting Dr. Matthew James from Psychology Today. But that definition of fear is so perfect, that fear restricts rather than expands who you are. So if you're not sure if you're deciding from fear or not, you can ask yourself, does this feel like it's constricting me or expanding me? And it makes a huge difference in your decision making if you're deciding from expansion and spaciousness, versus contraction or constriction. Um, and I know there are definitely a lot of high stakes in this journey. And you can have your back against the wall and still decide from expansion, not contraction or fear. And I say that because some entrepreneurs have a pattern of believing that um, that is what is keeping them in momentum, is that survival mode or being driven from fear of failure, which is actually what Jensen Huang said. And so here's an example of how this could affect how you speak to yourself and your decision making. If you are thinking from fear or a negative frame, that's keeping you in place or even maybe putting you backwards, you might say like, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Here is a reframing for putting yourself in more expansive mindset. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? You could say, I am leveling up like in Super Mario Brothers. I'm just hitting a new obstacle. I got through some fireballs. And okay, I didn't win this boss fight. So I hit a new obstacle. But I'm recognizing where I am in this journey and I'm leveling up. But you know what? Forget this way of linear thinking. I don't want to go through like all these levels, fight all the bosses. What I want to do is figure out a way to be much higher leverage. And in Super Mario Brothers, by the way, if you didn't play this game, that's okay. You don't need to have played the game to know what I'm talking about. But there is something called warp zones. And basically, it's a secret way to jump and skip worlds to finish the game faster. And so my analogy for you is, how do you ask yourself, how do I get to these warp zones? And, in line with this framing, I would ask you to speak to yourself like, I'm using my zone of genius and leveraging executive coaching and a sounding board to find my version of warp zones. These are non-linear paths that get me an exponential leap to my 10x or my next 100x. How do I get to my own version of warp zones to get to that level 100 boss? Okay, Super Mario Brothers did not have 100 levels, but you get what I mean. That is the kind of positive framing you could have in your brain instead of a negative framing like, oh, I'm so screwed, man, this deal fell through, it's over, why is this happening to me? Do you see the difference? I just wanted to spark your mind on what that could look like for you and the possibilities. Okay, and so the last thing related to all this that I want to spark to your mind on is a reframing on energy management, in the vein of how do you manage your mental energy when you find yourself caught in the loop of negative framing. And so I just want to share my screen. I love this AI Buddha that has gotten very popular on Instagram very quickly. It's AI, not a real person. Yes. So the reframing in those moments that you can use for yourself, as the AI Buddha said, is if you are going to overthink the positives. Overthinking can also be a shadow of strategic strengths. So this is why I bring up this reframing in this moment. And you can go find this AI Buddha on Instagram yourself. It's Yang Munoz. I could put it in the show notes. But basically, yeah, in those moments of negative framing, tell yourself, if you're going to overthink the positives. Our brain can only have one thought at a time. And so why not make it a positive one? So how about you? It's not easy to break out of a blind spot or negative framing pattern on our own, but I wanted to spark your mind on what's possible for you too. This is fully within our control. To break past your blind spots and close gaps from where you are today to where you want to be, and to get these transformational unlocks for you in your own version, the next step is I invite you to reach out or book a call on my LinkedIn. I specialize in helping CEOs, founders, and senior executives get strategic clarity and conviction in your journey leading AI innovation and transformation by using your zone of genius for higher leverage and to shift to your 10x or 100x identity faster. My zone of genius is maximizing your zone of genius. I'm an executive coach and former product leader, 20 plus years in Silicon Valley, startups and high growth companies. I started my career on Wall Street, MIT Sloan MBA, avid pickleball player, and zone of genius maximizer. Wishing you your best energy and highest leverage in your zone of genius. And let me take a quick look. I don't see any questions in the comments, but as always, I highly encourage you to ask any questions in the comments and have a beautiful day.